And we are back, and as we enter what I described as the toughest game week to predict in terms of predictions, we now have to try and build a fantasy football team to correspond to the said fixtures as well. Now, my advice before we get into this week's video, if I were you guys, would be to focus on getting players in your teams for the upcoming game weeks. There are still three double game weeks to come before the end of the season, and this is game week 33 of 38. So of the remaining 6 game weeks, 3 of them consist of double game weeks. So that would be my priority for this week. Start building up players that are going to be playing in those double game weeks. This is such a difficult week to call regardless. It's probably not worth putting in a player just for this week. It makes much more sense to put in players that are going to be playing more than once in the next few weeks. That is my initial advice. We will, of course, still be building a team of players who I think you should need for this game week if you are desperately looking for someone good to put in just for these midweek games. But before we do that, as always, we'll round up how I got on in game week 32. Shout out all of those managers that were able to beat the team that I built. And before we get into it, once more, a quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, and drop a like on the video if you enjoy these fantasy football series. Let's get straight in to my team from game week 32. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit disappointed all round with the overall score. Not necessarily with some of the players that I went for. Obviously, I went for Aaron Ramsdale as my goalkeeper. That ended badly after just 20 seconds of the first game of the game week with his outward pass going to Alcaraz. But my other goalkeeping choice in Sam Johnson was the highest scoring goalkeeper last weekend, so no complaints from that. It's just a shame I can't get points from all of them. The defence did reasonably well, apart from the 2 Aston Villa players. Midfield, again, did relatively well, apart from Ibere Eze, and the attack was really disappointing. And in hindsight, to not go for Ivan Toney at home, even though it was against an informed Aston Villa, was a bit of an oversight in my part when it came to last week's video. So if you did have Ivan Toney, you scored a lot more points than I did. And it's just sod's law that I went for the likes of Jesus and Ibere Eze when I could have gone for the likes of Ivan Toney and Bukayo Saka. It's the joys of fantasy football. You pick players from a team that scores 3 goals, but you pick the player that did nothing when that happens. So that's just the way it is. Very pleased with my choice to go for Diogo Jota. If you, like me, put him in your main teams this last week, make sure to keep him in your teams. As I said in last week's video, he tends to go on a run when he gets that opener. So that can be my first tip for this week if you are looking for players to put in. Diogo Jota is one of the players with a double game week coming up soon. So make sure he is in and around your teams with the form he has hit in the last couple of games. Let's see how many people were able to defeat my 63-point score from last week, because there were a fair few, and you can see them on your screen now. The biggest winner this week being Chris Brown with a staggering score of 90. He did free hit, but even if I'd have got all of the best options from my squad, he still would have beaten me. Going for Diogo Jota as captain and going for Joel Linton in midfield, who obviously got a goal and assist inside the first 5 minutes against Tottenham. So great team assembled by Chris at the weekend. Very much deserving of his 90 points. And as you can see, we had a fair few other winners as well. The majority of them still had their free hits left over, and fair play to them for holding on to a free hit this late on into the season. I'm assuming it is because they had built up all of their players for these upcoming double game weeks and just quickly free hit them out for this weekend. So smart plays from all of them, well deserving of the points that they got. Let's see what that has done to the league table, and it has meant that the gap at the top has slightly closed for some people but not for others, as David Linton, our original closest challenger, only scored 44, meaning that James Morris has actually extended his lead, even though second and fourth have managed to close the gap slightly. So not too bad for him. 6 game weeks to go, 60 points clear. It looks like he may still hang on to the lead. My team sadly only scored 44 as well, which means that my chase of the top 10 might sadly be over, as I have lost some serious ground on the people around me. But we shall see. Still 6 game weeks to go. I have a lot of players prepared for the double game weeks in my main team. Now let's see who I am going for in game week 33. And these are the players that I think you should be looking at if you are looking to get a cheap and valuable option in for tonight and this midweek fixtures games. And we'll start, as always, with the two goalkeepers. And if you watched yesterday's predictions video, you'll notice that I actually only went for one clean sheet in the entire Premier League. So out of the 20 teams playing in the midweek fixtures, I've only gone for one clean sheet in my predictions, and that was for Brighton, which is why I've gone for Sanchez and Dunk in my goalkeepers and defence. And the biggest worry is that Sanchez might not even play, because sometimes they play Steele at the moment. So just in case Sanchez doesn't play, my backup goalkeeper is Nick Pope. Of course, Newcastle on a great run of form at the moment offensively, but not the best run defensively. Only one clean sheet in, I think it was their last 12 games. So even though they still have a very good defensive record, they have started leaking the odd one goal every now and again. But against Everton, I think they have a good chance. Hence why I've also gone for Kieran Trippier on the bench as well. As for the rest of the defenders, I've gone for Kyle Walker-Peters against Bournemouth. I was really trying to get some more Southampton players in. I really wanted to try and fit Alcaraz into the team, but I just fancied all the other midfielders over Alcaraz. But he's very, very cheap, scoring goals, creating assists, especially against Arsenal at the weekend. And against Bournemouth, very good chance for Alcaraz to do something. So keep an eye on him if you want a cheap option there. And obviously, like I say, I've gone for Walker-Peters because I think Southampton have half a chance of a clean sheet. And obviously, if they're playing five at the back, Walker-Peters will be playing right wing back and getting very heavily involved going forward. Alex Moreno, we've spoken about him the last few weeks. Obviously, very good at going forward for Aston Villa. Against Fulham, not completely convinced they'll keep a clean sheet. But again, he's always a threat going forward and he's still very, very cheap, considering how well he has been doing. My final defender on the bench, you'll notice I've gone for Ruben Diaz. Now, Manchester City's record at the moment is near enough flawless. They've won 12 of their last 13 games. The only one they didn't win was the 1-1 draw in the second leg against Bayern Munich, which essentially was a game that was already over. And Ruben Diaz's return from injury has been massive in that revival defensively. So I think there is a chance that Arsenal don't score against Manchester City. I expect Arsenal to score, but the way City are playing, there is a very strong possibility that they don't. And if they don't, I'd be backing Ruben Diaz to pick up a couple of bonus points as well, because he'll inevitably be involved heavily in the defensive outlay. As for the midfield, we will once again start with a Brighton player against Nottingham Forest, and that is, of course, Alexis McAllister this time. I know people have March, Mitoma, Gross. It really doesn't matter which one you go for. I'm backing McAllister just because of how Nottingham Forest play. I think their midfield is their weakest area, and that is where McAllister obviously plays in that attacking midfield role. Could have gone for Enciso as well, but I think McAllister is more likely to start in that role. We shall see when it comes to that game. It is also worth noting that Brighton have all three double game weeks coming up. So Brighton have double game weeks in game week 34, 36 and 37. So if you don't have three Brighton players in your team yet, make sure you're getting a Brighton player in your team this week, because I think Nottingham Forest is a very good fixture for them. And then, like I say, three double game weeks out of the final five. And if you're not having Brighton players in your team, you're going to be missing out on some serious points. Next to McAllister, I've gone for Emi Buendia, another player on a lot of form for Aston Villa. You'll also see up front, I've gone for Ollie Watkins. Those are the front two. Watkins plays up front with Emi Buendia behind. I'm expecting both to be involved against Fulham this week. Inside of Buendia, I have gone for Riyad Mahrez. He is probably the biggest risk in terms of midfield. The reason I've gone for him is because, firstly, he just scored a hat-trick against Sheffield United in the FA Cup semi-final. Normally, Pep rewards players for having a big performance in an important game. And, of course, they are against Arsenal. And I don't really fancy Zinchenko against whoever plays in that right-wing position, whether it's Mahrez, Bernardo Silva or Phil Foden. I've gone for Riyad Mahrez. Like I say, off the back of the hat-trick, I'd expect him to keep his place. But it is a risk. Better people than me have done have failed at predicting Pep Guardiola lineups. So Mahrez is my gamble. We shall see. And next to him, we've gone for Bruno Fernandes. Now, he is the one that I probably could have taken out for Alcaraz of Southampton, but I think the influence that he had on the Brighton game, it's so noticeable when he doesn't play for Manchester United. Tottenham in a bit of disarray, especially off the back of the 6-1 defeat to Newcastle. They have since removed Stellini and put Ryan Mason back in charge, so we could see a slight change in mindset for Tottenham going into Thursday night's game. Does throw a bit of doubt over the prediction that I did for Manchester United to win, but I'm still expecting Bruno Fernandes to have a big influence on the game, albeit through goals, assists, penalties, corners, whatever you want. I think he's going to do something this week. And then finally, I've gone for Jarrod Bowen, who has been consistently producing goals or assists the last few game weeks. Liverpool's defence is all over the shop at the moment. They are still scoring goals the other way, but they are conceding a lot, and I'm backing Jarrod Bowen to do some damage against the club that tried to sign him last summer. Finally, we have the attack, and I've already spoken about Ollie Watkins over the last few weeks and in this video already, so we'll skip over him. Erling Haaland, I've gone for captain. Yesterday's prediction, I went for 4-1 to Manchester City against Arsenal. I'm expecting Haaland to score at least 1 or 2. Unless Saliba is back, I think he's going to run riot in this game, and that is why I've gone for him as captain. And my final option is Alexander Isak. You cannot knock this man's form at the moment. 7 goals in his last 7 games. He's absolutely flying. He's doing everything we expected him to do in the Premier League. And against a weary and relatively frightened Everton side defensively over the last few weeks, I'm expecting Isak to do the damage once again. I think he's got far too much quality for those Everton defenders, and I expect to see him on the score sheet once again. And of course, another player like I spoke about at the start of the video, I would still be looking at Diogo Jota for this week. I know I can't fit all those players onto the squad screen, but like I say, against West Ham, even though I've gone for a West Ham win, I still gave Liverpool 2 goals in my prediction yesterday, and I would expect Jota to be involved somewhere. And that is going to be it for this week's video. All that is left to say is if you think your team has what it takes of beating my best of Game Week 33 team, you can still join the Esso 99 League with the code on screen. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back with my post-match reaction to Manchester United Tottenham on Thursday evening. I'll see you then.